WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany tasting rare and exotic whiskeys. Dang, look at that. Michter's 10-year-old straight rye whiskey. I do have a sample here. Thank you very much to my friend Marcel who sold me 5 CLs of this, which is great. Now, this is Whiskybase number 146211. So I do have a nice little bottle code because the bottle code is important, the cask number. 19, which means this was bottled 2019. F, usually it's the month. And then the 933, which I really don't know. So please write down in the comments how to read the label of Michter's correctly. I could have asked the brand ambassador here over in Germany. Oh well. I'm sure the internet knows it better than I do. I did Google, couldn't find anything. I just know the first 2 numbers is the year that it was bottled usually. All right, 220 euros is the price we're paying over here for this. That's a lot to be honest, but hey, that's the way things are at the moment here. 46.4% always. So single barrel, they always take it down to 46.4%. Well, that's okay. And it's fairly difficult to get bottles. I think in 2022, it might have been 21, the 4 bottles made it to Germany. Might have been 10, but it was less than 10. I heard 4. So, what am I going to compare it to? I'm just going to compare it to the standard Michter single barrel Kentucky straight rye whiskey. The US number 1, this is L18F876. Now, I'm paying 50 euros for this over here. Sometimes I can get on sale for 48. Sometimes I can see it online for a more expensive price of 55. But 50 is basically 49.90 is the standard price. Now, to be very, very honest, I think Michter's has gone through a little bit of a reconciliation with the past. Let's say that, all right? So if I take a look at this bottle, it might actually still say something on here. Distilled in small batches according to the Michter's pre-revolutionary war quality standards dating back to 1753. Now, we have to, when we talk about Michter's, we have to go back to 1753. And the website says the following. Michter's is proud to honor a legacy tracing back to the founding of America's first whiskey company in 1753. So we know that in Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania, yay, there was a Swiss Mennonite farmer. His name was John Schenk, and he actually started a whiskey company in 1753. I have no idea the name of that whiskey company. Now, in the early days, Schenks produced whiskeys just from the rye grains, the favorite local crop in the Pennsylvania Blue Mountain Valley, where the distillery was located. Now, what happened is that in the mid-1800s, so about 25 years later, a Pennsylvania Dutchman named Abraham Bamberger purchased the distillery, and after that, it became known as Bamberger's. So what Michter's did is they actually did a commemorative type of limited edition every year, Schenks, to commemorate John Schenk, the farmer. And they also have a nice little Bamberger. So also to commemorate Abraham Bamberger, who purchased the distillery and kept it alive. Now, the distillery more or less changed hands many, many, many times up until Prohibition. After Prohibition, it reopened, and it changed hands many, many, many times after that as well. And in the 1950s, there was a distillery owner back then named Lou Foreman. And he was the person who created the Michter's brand. What did he do? He took the names of 2 of his sons, Michael, Mich, and Peter, Tiers, Michters, and just combined them together and created that brand. Now, we all hopefully know that in the 80s, the whiskey industry had its low point. No one was basically buying brown spirits. Everyone was doing everything else, but hey, brown spirits, in particular bourbons and American whiskeys, just almost died out. Some of the bigger brands are very, very thankful that they exported to Japan to keep them alive. Now, in 1989, the Michter's distillery went bankrupt. The owners back then left everything in despair. They actually gave up the name Michter's. There were some barrels left there, and so on and so on. And the brand ended. Now, we have to go forward a couple of years, and we see a guy. He was a lawyer, Joseph Maglico. I'm not great with the name. And his mentor, which was Richard Newman. They actually are like, hey, let's resurrect this brand. Now, Joseph, he actually worked during his time at college. He sold Michter's. He was a bartender. He actually was a salesman for Michter's, so he knew the brand. And his partner, his mentor, the Richard Dick Newman, he actually had he was the CEO of Austin Nichols Wild Turkey. He ran the old Grandad, Old Crow, Old Taylor for National Distillers, today Jim Beam Suntory. He was the president of that. So this was a guy who knew the whiskey business. And they're like, okay, we're going to apply for the patent for that name, for that intellectual property. Michter's got it, and then they started sourcing barrels. Now, back then, 1990s, people were still not drinking bourbon. The bourbon boom didn't happen until about 2000. And what was really interesting is there was some old stock out there that basically no one wanted. There was 20-year-old bourbon. There was 20-year-old ryes out there that the distillery is like, take it off our hands. We'll almost give it to you for free. Not literally, but for a very good price because we can't use it. Yeah, the thinking way back then, 20-some years ago, was that a bourbon reaches its best zenith around 12 years, and after that, yeah, don't forget, back then, Pappy Van Winkle could not hardly give away his stock. Yeah, today it's like a 23-year-old, I'm going to pay my left kidney for this one. And it's a totally different ball game today, because we now, the bourbon connoisseurs out there, think older is always better. Not always, sorry. So what Michter's did, actually they bought these old casks from different companies. Some of the rumors I read is some of the first bottles were actually Stitzer Weller, wheated whiskey, talking about Pappy Van Winkle and so on. They actually commissioned Brown-Forman around the year, when was that? 2005? Yep, 2004. They contracted Brown-Forman to do their distilling for them. And so now it still says, and I'm really, really, really picky about the label. Even my bottle here says bottled by Michter's. It does not say distilled by Michter's. Now today, Michter's have 3 sites that they actually work with and work on. And that's actually very, very, very nice because they need a lot of place. They need a lot of room here, all right? So we have the 3 different places you can go to. You can go to the 75,000 square foot distillery in Chevely in Louisville. You can go to the Fort Nelson building, which is a tourist attraction in the heart of Louisville and Whiskey Row that I walked by, and it was closed on the day that I was there. Shame on you. And they have a 205-acre farm in Springfield, Kentucky, which they're going to use or have already used to build something there. So they are making their own juice. They are doing great stuff, but most of the stuff, at least that has reached Germany so far, has not been distilled by Michter's themselves. And at the very beginning, at least when they came to Germany at the beginning, they tried to sell it as if everything they made was their own. And that kind of had a little bit of a bad touch in my heart. Since then, I've heard great people, a lot of ladies at Michter's that have actually turned the story around and talk about the different chapters, about the chapters before the brand went bankrupt, the time at the very beginning where they were sourcing, and now the time where they're distilling themselves and switching over to their own juice, which I love. I love that story. Tell the story, be transparent, be open, be honest. That's the story we whiskey geeks want out there. Now, the question that I'm going to have is, which one is better? Is the $50 better, €50 bottle, or the 220? Now, if you look at the color here, 10 versus 4 at least, now the 10 is darker. 46.4, 43, 42.4, sorry. So on the nose, it doesn't smell like a real rye. I have a question. Now, I know out there in the single malt Scotch world, especially in the single malt Scotch peated Islay world, that the longer you keep a peated whiskey in a cask, the less of the phenol, that less of that peaty smokiness is in the whiskey after 20, 25, 30 years. So the smokiness, the peatiness actually decreases the longer it's in the cask. Could it be that the rye aromas actually dissipate over time in the cask as well? Or is this just a barely legal rye? Is this a 51% rye? It's got acetone. It's got a little bit of fingernail polish remover. And it's got some darker notes here of caramel. I'm going to go over the hazelnut. It might be actually like a roasted peanut or something like that. If I go to the official thing, it says here roasted almonds. Okay. Deep notes of chocolate, deep notes of vanilla, toffee, toasted almonds, and cinnamon with an ample dose of crushed pepper, hot, and a hint of orange citrus. That's the tasting notes here. Over here, I like. It has much more of that rye bread, that rye dough, a little bit of that grassy rye moment going on here. What I'm doing at the moment, actually, is over here in Germany, I do with my fans online, I do a super mega blind challenge. So I take 18 different bottles. Our rules are anywhere between 40 and 50% ABV, anywhere under 65 euros, and we have 18 bottles. And so I have here, I mentioned that in my Old Forest Rye. So this bottle's in there. And we have not done the first preliminary, second or third preliminary round. The first and second place continue on into the finish, into the final, and then we'll see what we're going to rank the ryes that are available in Germany. And I expect this to be in the top 3. I hope. I really like this. I think this is one of the best ryes out there. All right, good. So when I was doing my Old Forester, I could have put this unofficially in as well. It could have been the Old Forester Rye, it could have been the Jack Daniels Rye, and it could have been the Woodford Reserve Rye. And since this was probably made by Brown-Forman as well, could have been in there as well in that fold. On the nose, this wins. It's much less of that burning alcohol bite in there. All right, so now I am not of the opinion that more expensive whiskey is always better. I am not of the opinion that older is better. Sorry, you can turn off the video right now if you want and go someplace else. I am of the opinion that I have a certain palate, and sometimes I like one whiskey more than the other, even though it should be the opposite way around. Should. The expected result. So let's try this. Cheers. This is the control whiskey. This is going to be my taste. It's somewhat hot for 46.4%. I've had 50 plus whiskeys that have tasted much less of a bite of an alcohol burn on there. There's tannins going on. There's a lot of wood, oak going on there. And only like 10 seconds later in the aftertaste do I get a nice sweetness. A little bit like a sweetened iced tea moment. But there's a lot of tannins. A little bit of an oaky, spicy oak moment. The more bourbons I taste, the more I realize I'm not a great fan of that spicy oak moment. There's Bourbon Pursuit, and there's Fred Minnick. And Fred Minnick, for example, he loves the old spicy oak moments. Now, Cecil, for example, he likes the sweet oak. And I think I'm more along his line of thinking and his palate as well. Often sweeter without being too sweet is better. This has still, it's got a somewhat longer aftertaste. It's still there. And it's still more or less, I've chewed on a popsicle stick, that oak. Not what I want in my whiskeys. All right, a second try, then I'm just going to go over the Michters. It's not a bad whiskey. It's a C plus whiskey. But for 220 euros, it's a D minus, almost F whiskey for price, value for money. This is not something I recommend buying. Sorry. Try before you buy here, definitely. All right, so I bought a little sample. Maybe you can try it at a bar. I don't know. Now, you can buy it and then give it to a friend who's willing to pay double the amount of money. That's something else. Because availability is more the problem with Michter's 10 than actually anything else. As I said, I think 10 bottles made it to Germany here in the year 2022. High rye bourbon, older, oaky. I still get a little bit of nail polish remover. Not my top 10 whiskey at all. 10-year-old. Now, in comparison, Michter's normal, straight rye whiskey, single barrel as well. I really think it's a shame that they dilute down the single barrels to all of the same strength. So 42.4, 48, 46.4. I think it has something to do with the labeling. Each label has to be approved by the government, and often the proof has to be on there. So why not just make all the single barrels the same and just streamline your workflow? But sometimes a whiskey will be better at 48, 50, 43. You don't have that possibility. Everything's just uniform. And I find that a little bit of a shame. All right, my Michters on the nose, I like it better. And on the palate as well. I really like the rye focus of this whiskey. No burn, no bite, oak and vanilla support, and everything is like it should be. I don't know if that's a great explanation of what's really going on here, but that's how I actually feel this is what that is. The official tasting note says here, spice with pepper notes, citrus, butterscotch, and oak. I don't get any citrus. I'm so sorry. Minimum at least 4 years of age. Mash bill, we don't know. Where it was distilled, I don't know. But I do know that this is a whiskey I'm going to give a B- to, and a value for money, a C. 50 euros, not bad. There's stuff out there a little bit cheaper, but still C, I'm going to buy this. And I would prefer to have 4.5 bottles of this compared to one of these. Now, I did find from a couple years ago 160 pounds for a whiskey auction site, 220. So people are flipping them. People are actually offering them on different websites, and maybe you get lucky. Maybe you can find something, but I would definitely try before I buy this. So, what is your favorite Michter's product out there? One of my favorite Michter's products out there is the unblended. Why is it the unblended American whiskey? Why is it not a bourbon? Has nothing to do with the mash bill. That's the sour mash. The sour mash is less than 51% corn, therefore it cannot be called a bourbon. There is a bourbon from Michter's, but my favorite here is the unblended because just like old times, also Brown-Forman product, they put it in used oak. Similarities? All right, good. Really like this. Really nice. Well done. So thank you very much for liking, subscribing, sharing, telling others, and I wish you all the best. Whiskey Jason here. Bye-bye.